Okay.
Microphone check. Let's take a look at Black Mexico, Race and Society from Colonial to Modern Times, edited by Ben Vinson III and Matthew Ristal.
You're at 109 right now.
In the back cover, it says, "The essays in this collection build upon a series of conversations and papers that resulted from New Directions in North American Scholarship on Afro-Mexico, a symposium conducted at Pennsylvania State University in 2004. The issues addressed include contested historiography, social and economic contributions of Afro-Mexicans, social construction of race, and ethnic identity, forms of agency and resistance, and contemporary inquiry into ethnographic work on Afro-Mexican communities, comprised of a core set of chapters that examine the colonial period and a shorter epilogue addressing the modern era. This volume allows the reader to explore ideas of racial representation from the 16th century into the 21st. So let me find a title and maybe read a little bit of it. Contents: Introduction, Black Mexico and the Historical Discipline. Maybe we'll start with the introduction. Seems like a fine place to begin. See how many pages it is first. Wow, let's see. This could be quite a long read. Black Mexico and the Historical Discipline. Well, let's just read a couple pages. I don't want the video to be too long. Introduction, Black Mexico and the Historical Discipline. Ben Vinson III. Examining issues of race in Latin America has always been a rather slippery enterprise, given the multiplicity of racial categories that have existed in the region, the ways racial identities have been historically embraced and denied over the past few centuries, and the political stakes involved in claiming them. The premium placed upon racial mixture has also added to the task, making race so malleable that its very utility and meaning has been subject to question. Throughout the 19th, 20th, and early 21st centuries, and even during moments in the colonial period, some questions arise. To what extent has blackness, or even mulatto identities, really mattered when one considers that racial mixture can distort the boundaries of these identities? How can whiteness or indigenous identities be meaningfully mobilized when the preponderance of the region's populations can claim these heritages through hybrid ancestries? And finally, because race is so ideologically contested, should concerns over nationalism, national identity, class consciousness, and even ethnic identity be deemed more important toward understanding the social relations of the region? Well, heck, I'll just stop right there. So, identity. I get it that this is about identity politics and, what defines blackness really? When you have mulattoes, you have mixtures of, blood, sangre. What then do you make of, a person's identity? All right. And then policies that are developed along the lines of these racial boundaries, like what then? Are they even valid? can't even, um, how can you police such a thing as identity when the blood is mixed and the person, there are some gray areas and what have you. All right. So that right there is Black Mexico. Mexico, Mexico. Different pronunciations, same region, same nation. All right, the next book is Blacks in Colonial Veracruz, Race, Ethnicity, and Regional Development. And this book was written by Patrick J. Carroll. All right, I guess we'll check out the introduction here as well. At least one paragraph or so. It says, in the first introduction to this book, written in 1990, I wrote, Afro-Veracruzanos represent a largely forgotten people who have received less attention than other groups that contributed to the emergence of colonial New Spain. This study attempts to add to the handful of post-World War II works that include, among others, the groundbreaking investigations of Gonzalo Aguirre Beltran, the overview of Colin Palmer, the comparative perspective of Gerald Cardoso, and the regional Veracruz inquiries of Adriana Naveda, Chavez Ita, and Gilberto Bermudez Ngorochotegui. Because of increasing attention devoted to Afro-Mexicans over the last decade, the above statements are no longer true. Since 1990, not only has the number of studies on blacks in colonial Mexico proliferated, but the level of their sophistication has increased as well. In my mind, this monograph has one central point in common with these newer works. Their overarching goal is to place Afro-Mexicans in some type of broader context. The exact nature of that context and the strategies to accomplish this may vary from scholar to scholar, but the goal of each is to determine what Afro-Mexicans had in common with and what set them apart from other groups in this complex organic colonial setting. Brief mention of but a few of these new investigations and their findings will illustrate this point. All right. Just the first paragraph of the introduction. That's it. Blacks in Colonial Veracruz. The next text is Afro-Latino Voices. Narratives from the early modern Ibero-Atlantic world, 1550 to 1812. Edited by Catherine Joy McKnight and Leo J. Garofalo. Introduction. Recovering Afro-Latino voices from the early modern Ibero-Atlantic world. First paragraph. African and African descent peoples played central roles in building Spanish and Portuguese empires and their American colonies from the 1500s through the 1800s. They sailed ships, built infrastructure, produced crops and material goods, provided services, shaped societies, and molded cultural attitudes, beliefs, and expressions. Yet, their voices have been largely barred from the published record. We know of their lives from recent historical scholarship and through historical and literary works of the period in which primarily European authors represent them more often than not, distorting their voices and experiences. All right, so we want to hear from them directly rather than get the secondhand narrative or narration, secondhand account. We want firsthand account. So that's what Afro-Latino Voices gives the reader. And then finally, Black and Brown. African Americans and the Mexican Revolution, 1910-1920. And let's see. the introduction. All right, here we go. Page 1, the introduction. Jack Johnson was smiling. Why the burly black boxer would be mirthful was unclear. After all, here he was at the border between Tijuana, Mexico, and Southern California, about to surrender to the U.S. authorities after avoiding their clutches for years. A prison term was sure to follow, and in 1920, an African American, even a celebrity like the former heavyweight champion, could hardly expect a bacchanalian revel behind bars. Palm trees swayed lazily in the summer breezes nearby, and ocean waves crashed on the beach as Johnson, in a well-appointed automobile, approached the boundary between Mexico and the United States. He exited the car, shook hands with several Mexican officials, no doubt thanking them for the lavish hospitality he had enjoyed from their government in recent months. Motion picture cameras, word and still cameras clicked, seeking to capture this exceptional event for posterity. Spectators watched. Then he walked slowly to the U.S. Customs House, presented his passport to an eagerly awaiting official, and stepped across the border into U.S. soil. Somewhat disingenuously, he told the assembly, the Mexican government had issued no deportation order against me, as was reported some weeks ago, and I could have remained in Tijuana as long as I was willing to obey the laws of Lower California. But for a long time, I wanted to return and get my troubles adjusted. Wow. So right out of the mouth of Jack Johnson, we're getting an account of friendly reception of an African American by Mexicans. So we must really consider the importance of Mexico, Mexico. And we really have to consider that, because one of the reasons why I'm making this video and why I'm here right now is because of the position I'm in. I teach Spanish, and right now it is Black History Month, and then drawing the connections between the African American experience and the Mexican experience is integral to a deeper understanding of where we are today. Drawing connections between the two supposedly distinct separate groups. That's important, but also history is important to the student. We have to know the past in order to know where we're going in the future. And so little is actually being taught about Mexico in the United States that I think that our interaction with others, Latinos in general, okay, I think it's more contentious. It's more adversarial than it is actually, warm and beneficial. Because when I think of my travels to Mexico or any other Latin American country, I think of the warm reception, the delicious foods, the kindness of the people. But in Los Angeles, all of that is muddled, and it is, it can be a stressful experience to be in Los Angeles and to see, the many Latinos making their way, and as a black man trying to fit into a society that I was born into, but then, and not only for myself, but I mean for others as well. Trying to fit in and trying to find your way in a society today, America's society, California society, Los Angeles society, that is overwhelmingly Latino. And so being a Spanish teacher, I am thankful to my mother and father, thankful to God that I had the opportunity to learn Spanish, but then also I am grateful for the position to be in to impart what I know from rigorous study of the language with, you know, black students and brown students. Okay, let's not get it twisted. I do have Latino students in my class who haven't studied their language as rigorously as a student of languages, does. Or rather, they haven't studied, yes, that's correct. And they haven't studied the language as native speakers of the language do not. Okay. So let me explain that. As a native English speaker, I didn't study the English language as rigorously as I did after I was charged with the task of teaching English. When I moved to South Korea and I became an English teacher, I was a native English teacher, I was confronted with aspects of the English language that I hadn't focused on before, or rather I had ignored because it wasn't of prime concern for me. But being that I was a teacher, I had to brush up. I had to focus on those areas of weakness in my English language experience. And the same thing with Latinos who may speak the language, speak Spanish, but oftentimes do not have the time or the inclination, desire to read their language, which hinders them from building their vocabulary, and then also perhaps even thinking, you know, in a more complex, manner. Especially, without reading, you will be hindered in your ability to even express yourself, right? So this video underscores the importance of reading, of language, learning, and history. The importance of learning history. All right. I'm out. This is IC 109. Peace and blessings.
You're at 109 right now.
October 9th. That's where it starts.
You see, it's the same old thing.